Hello, Grand Strand. This is Richard Florzak, private chef to the stars, and welcome to Talking About Food. Remember, it's the only local food review show on the Grand Strand that talks specifically about restaurants, food trucks, festivals, and farmers markets. We interview local chefs, local food business owners, and please remember, contrary to a restaurant chef, I cooked in a home, just like most of you listeners. So always remember, you are your family's private chef. So today I have in the studio a really, really cool guy. I met him through a friend, and I'm so glad that I did. He has been in sales. He's an entrepreneur. He's a video marketing, I call him a mogul because he's just so good at what he does. You may know him through Facebook groups called Pawleys Island Peeps. If you haven't heard of that one, I don't know where you folks live. He's also the owner of Peeps Media Group. He's a philanthropist, and you probably are wondering why I have somebody like that in the studio, and we're going to find out exactly why. There is a very interesting and unique connection. His name is Dave Clayton. Dave, welcome to Talking About Food.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Honor is all mine. Tell the listeners, if you can, you were telling me off the air about how you got where you are today, and I'm just blown away by it. So if you can just give the listeners a little background.
Sure. So I was I grew up in the area, and I was a musician. I played the trumpet, and I loved it. I'm a Coastal Carolina graduate. Actually failed out of Juilliard. I went to Juilliard.
Is that right?
Yeah, man.
Wow.
And came back, got my degree from Coastal Carolina University in intradisciplinary studies.
What is that?
At the time, it was a way to get a degree without a whole bunch of classes.
Yeah. Yeah, I could have used you a couple of years back. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I got that degree and played the trumpet for a while, kept having babies, couldn't afford them. My wife always said I was a car salesman at heart.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I went into a dealership, and it was a great connection. Tidelands Ford in Pawleys Island. Worked there for almost 20 years.
Wow.
And retired. And it was a great career.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. And so how did you then move into the whole Facebook thing?
So Pawleys Island Peeps kept growing.
Yeah.
The group kept growing. We kept being able to help local businesses. And so I've really got a heart for that.
Yeah.
I feel like at Tidelands Ford, I was a helper. You know, I love to help people, and that's really what's happened with Pawleys Island Peeps. Not only do we help local businesses, but we help charities like All for Paws Animal Rescue.
Yeah, which my wife and I are big donators to. It's such a wonderful organization. And I think it's interesting, even with everything that you've accomplished so far in your life, and I'm sure there'll be a heck of a lot more. The thing that jumped out, once again, even though this is a food show, the thing that jumped out at me the most is the fact that you're connected with animal rescue. I mean, that's just so beautiful.
It's wonderful. That's such a great one. And when it's a rescue, that means these animals were going to be killed. And this rescue comes along and brings them in and saves their life. So it's great to be a part of that particular rescue. It's just
an absolutely wonderful organization. So with this kind of background and this type of exposure that you have in the Facebook world, how did you end? Because I follow all of your pages, and they're predominantly, I think I would say predominantly, a good portion of them are about food. How did you segue to the food world?
Sure. So our family, my father managed hospitals, and so we moved a lot. And when I say moved, I mean for a year or so. Like we lived in Rome, Italy, and we've moved. We were in Richmond, Virginia for a little bit. Even though we're from the area, it was we learned a lot about food when you go somewhere. The culture,
no doubt about it, no doubt.
And so my mom would burn macaroni and cheese. She was not a real chef, you'd say, but you would say she was.
Yeah.
There's a mouth for every kind of food, but her food had a very specific
blackened.
Exactly. So we would go out, and my dad celebrated it so much. He was all about, he appreciated all the different cuisines out there.
Yeah.
And it was always, man, this is the best steak I've ever had.
Right.
And he meant it.
Yeah. You asked me earlier on off the air, was I from a blue collar background? And my answer was, I'm from a blue collar background, but my father was white collar. And that's just the way it was. He was, I would call, one of the first foodies. It sounds very similar to your father. When other people were having pizza for Fridays, my mother was making fried scallops. Now that I'm not talking about that we were wealthier than the neighbor. No, it wasn't like that. Scallops just happened to be less expensive back then. But that was something that my friends have never heard of. So it sounds like your father, you said celebrated food. You said you were in Rome.
Yes.
How long were you there?
So a year. And I love to travel. So I would get on the Eurail and I'd end up in Paris or I'd end up in Stockholm.
Yeah.
And I got to experience a lot of different kinds of food, a lot of different kinds of pizza.
Yeah. When we were in Rome for 8 months when Mel Gibson was doing The Passion, and just outstanding food. What do you remember? What stands out to you about Rome food?
Just so many about the food.
Yeah.
I was really interesting to me just how fresh the seafood was, and the spices were just amazing.
Yeah. Did you notice that? I mean, I don't know how many locals' homes you visited, but first of all, buffalo mozzarella is just unbelievable. Now, they try to sell it here in the States, but it is just nothing like it. But I would go to certain people's houses, and it was like a tradition. They had fresh mozzarella soaking in water in a bowl out on the counter.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, man, it was so good.
The thing I noticed, too, is they never asked me, do you like this or do you like that?
Yeah.
They was just expected you did.
Yeah.
Everything they made for you was perfect.
Yeah. And it was insulting if you said no to anything.
That's right.
Yeah. And it took me a while to adjust to that, because they'd literally be yelling at you, sit down. That's right. You're going to eat now. And I would feel like, did I do something wrong? But it was just like their passion, and how, I often say in my intro that nothing brings people together like good food. And that was what they were doing.
Grazie.
Yeah.
They're thanking you too for being there.
Yes. No, that's true. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're acting as though it's a gift for them to be serving you food.
Yes.
Very cool. Where else did you travel? You said Paris. Do you remember what kind of food you had in Paris?
I just remember I was 20 years old, and I remember I'll just speak frankly here. I was disappointed in the food in Paris.
Yeah.
I went to the wrong places. Breakfast wasn't a big deal there. It was all pastries or whatever. And I couldn't grasp it.
Yeah. When I was in Paris, I had already traveled enough to know that when you're in the big famous cities, it's, they're going to cater to, the tourist, right?
Right.
So what I would do is I would seek out some concierge at a hotel and literally say to them, do not send me, to a touristy place. And I remember this gentleman, he gave me directions to this tiny little quaint restaurant way, walking distance outside of Paris. And I ended up having a basic chicken coq au vin, which is a standard French dish. That was just so good. Where else have you been?
So I really liked Norway.
Yeah.
And part of that was, at the time I was turning 21. And I know I think the drinking age was 18. I loved Germany. I loved all the Scandinavian foods and the German foods. I mean, I really enjoyed that so much.
Yeah, we were just in Germany in September. We were in Germany and then Poland, and had some phenomenal food in both countries. And once again, when we were in Germany, we stayed with my brother, so he helped, show us around. But in Krakow, Poland, we were at a hotel, and I did the same thing with the concierge. I said, we want authentic Polish pierogi. And she ended up sending us to a touristy kind of place. And I came back. I said, listen, I am a chef by trade. I don't want touristy places. I want to eat where you and your friends eat. And she said, oh, okay. Then you need to go to this place. And we went the night. It was fantastic. Now, Dave, do you cook?
I do. I love breakfast.
Yeah.
And so I love to cook. I love to make my daughter happy.
Yeah.
And my wife. So I love steaks. I love breakfast. I'm not a chef. It feels like, I'll tell you, I'm not a chef, but I do enjoy it. And I am not very patient. So I'll try it a bunch as I'm cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, I do enjoy, I make a great egg sandwich.
Yeah.
And my daughter is always so happy with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy. I can really fry an egg.
Hey, I learned as a private chef, I learned very, very early, if you can please the children,
yes,
you're 90% there. Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of breakfast, do you have favorite breakfast places around the area?
So I love Litchfield Diner.
Yeah.
I think it's a great place. And the people are so friendly. They're the type closest to what I was describing in Rome, grazie. When you come, they're thanking you for being there.
Yeah.
And I really like their food. I just feel like humility is so important, and you can sense it when you're eating the food. If there's when someone comes out from the back and asks you how your meal was,
yeah,
and they look you in the eye,
yes,
it goes so far.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not one to really ever send anything back. But sometimes just them coming out and describing exactly why that meal was the way it was,
yeah,
it's wonderful to hear, like what their heart was in preparing it.
Yeah, and that they want you to be satisfied.
Yes,
I had a restaurant for 9 years in Los Angeles, and if somebody wasn't satisfied, it just destroyed me. Sometimes I feel, spending 38 years in Los Angeles, it's considered one of the food capitals of the world, that food trends here can sometimes feel, and I'm asking you this because you've traveled, food trends here can sometimes feel like they take a while to catch up to sort of current trends. Do you see that?
I really feel like whatever, and I mentioned this to you earlier, and that is whatever brings people joy is where I believe a restaurant should go towards.
Yeah.
And so maybe in certain bigger cities, things are happening and then people start paying attention to it and then they copy it and bring it here. I don't think so. I think you have mom and pop businesses here locally that are simply trying to make the right decisions in what they're preparing on a daily basis so that they can pay their bills.
Yeah.
And that's what I see in our community. I see authentic people making authentic food.
Yeah. Which is one of the things that attracted me about being here. Back to my question about things sort of taking longer here. That doesn't bother me at all. And the reason why I bring that up is because some of the people that have come to visit will say about certain restaurants, hey, we were doing this, 10 years ago in New York. I don't care.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What attracts me about living in the Grand Strand is the people in the restaurant business, hopefully, taking advantage of what is to be offered in this area. I used to keep this article pinned up on my bulletin board at home. It was a quote from a chef. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember who the chef was, but the quote was, "I like playing with the classics." And I see that a lot here where they will take a classic dish and they'll do a little twist on it where they use some of the local ingredients, right?
Yes.
And then maybe introduce something that was, that they've discovered that was popular maybe a couple of years ago in New York or one of the other bigger cities. Mm-hmm. And I just dig that. I love it. I really do. Really do.
The potential here is there to be bipolar in all businesses. And that is because we have a tremendous summertime.
Yeah.
And then we have this not so tremendous wintertime. And so the cream rises and the best restaurants tend to do better.
That's such an interesting observation. I never thought of it that way because most places, are perceived as most touristy areas like the Grand Strand, the perception is they close down after, the season.
Yeah.
But like you said, the cream rises to the top. Some of the good ones, they hang around right through it because they have the popularity. Do you have or number of, we'll start out, fine dining spots that you like to frequent?
I love Bistro 217.
Oh, it's good. Yeah.
I like sitting at the outside bar.
Yeah.
And there's certain meals that they do that are just clean and I love their curry.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy that. I consider that fine dining.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I love the new restaurant in Georgetown right on Front Street called Alfresco Italian Bistro.
I've heard of that. I haven't been there yet.
I think that's the closest thing to authentic Italian cuisine in our community. One of them. I love Root Restaurant on Front Street.
I don't know. That's also in Georgetown?
It is. It's only a couple doors down up from Alfresco Italian Bistro. And it is one of the best steaks you can get on the Grand Strand.
Oh, Root.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll have to try that one. If I can just go back to 217 for a second, and going back to what that quote was about playing with the classics. The very first time I walked in there and I opened up the menu, I thought to myself, this is what he's doing. He's playing with the classics, which is great. And he's introducing local ingredients. I thought it was just spectacular.
Adam Kirby is so talented, and he really is a great teacher as well. So his sous chef, his people under him have learned. They're learning. It's a wonderfully. Ann Hardy is the owner of that restaurant, and she is amazing. She puts the right people in the right places, and they thrive.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I didn't know that about him teaching his employees. That's great, because then you really become that quintessential family.
Yes.
And that's hard. I mean, everybody has heard the horror stories of a restaurant. It's just like a revolving door. I had to deal with it myself. And when you get that sort of A-list crew, man, and everything's firing all four cylinders, it's a good thing. Yeah, I'm trying to get Adam on the show. I would love to pick his brain about a lot of I'd love to know how he chose certain things, but that is for another time. What about a favorites, mom and pop kind of places?
Well, I tell you, you have one right here. I think it's called Trattoria. It's an Italian restaurant.
La Trattoria.
Yeah,
I love it. I talked about them either on the first or second episode. I think they're fabulous.
Renee is a genius. Renee, the owner, she's a genius. And she's, I don't want to say a micromanager because that has a negative connotation, but she wants to be a part every day from open to close. She wants to be a part, and it's in her blood. Yeah. And she's such a giving person. What she does at Thanksgiving, she gives away turkeys. She makes meals she does all kinds of things for the community. Love that place. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. We're obviously on the same wavelength there, because I guess it was about a year ago was our first visit. And it is literally around the corner, but we also loved it. About favorite pizza.
That's a great.
And I've said a number of times before on the show that food is subjective to begin with. You like it or you don't. Don't tell me what's good and not good. If I don't like something that is supposedly good, I don't like it. And that's just the way it is. Even more with pizza.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Landolfi's pizza.
And I keep passing that, and I'm dying to stop in. And the two times that I planned to go, they weren't open, but I will get there. Landolfi's, what kind of pizza?
They have brick oven pizza.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fabulous. Yeah. And they have some, it really is kind of close to what I'd experienced in Rome.
Yeah.
It's thinner pizza.
Right.
It's not doughy. Right. And you taste the ingredients. The pepperonis are not just normal frozen pepperonis. I mean, it's authentic.
Yeah.
I love it.
Right.
I really do.
Believe it or not, in my restaurant in Los Angeles, Flame Pizzeria, we did authentic wood-fired pizza. Flour came from Italy, 00, and long story. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was blown away by the crust at Bovines.
Hmm.
Bovines pizza. Their crust is as authentic as you could possibly get.
I've never had it.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
And I sort of stumbled upon it. My wife and I, we were fairly new to the area. We said, hey, let's go try this place, Bovine. We were going to go in there to get a steak or whatever. And I go, oh, wait a minute. They're doing pizzas. Let me try that. If I had one critique, the dough, the crust needed a little bit more flavor. I don't know if they use a fast acting or they do a sourdough starter, but I mean, I would go back there again in a heartbeat. It was that good.
The right texture.
Yeah. It thin in the middle, about an inch around the edge, nice char, almost hollow, crust, a nice chew to it. It was really good. Okay. You're world traveled. You've eaten all over the world. Spent most of your time here in South Carolina, right?
Yes.
Virginia, Rome, Paris. What is the one food you and maybe your wife whip up at home that is so trashy you'd be embarrassed to tell people about? Now, I'll give you, my wife and I have said it a number of times, believe it or not, Velveeta macaroni and cheese when we julienne some pepperoni in it. What's yours?
I like goulashes.
Yeah.
So I open the fridge. I see what's in there from whatever we've cooked in the last week. It needs to be either thrown away or thrown in a goulash.
Yeah.
And I throw it in a goulash. and some of the stuff I've had syrup that's almost gone bad, like just a little bit at the bottom that you really can't. It's time to add that to the goulash. I mean, everything, there is no, and it's a fun meal. Now that's the one that not always do the people that enjoy it.
Yeah.
I see the looks.
Yeah.
But then I tell you, we keep it on the stove or the crock pot. We do it in a crock pot. We keep it on there for a day or two.
Yeah.
And then after we're done, we have 7 dogs. Yesterday we got another one. We found one, one came up to us that was really struggling. So now we have 8 dogs. So at the end of the day, after we have all tried this, usually I'm the one that ends up eating it.
Yeah.
There's a certain pride in it. and it keeps you regular. I got to tell you that. So then there's a little bit left and I share it with the dogs. And it's really the only people food they're allowed.
Yeah.
But it's the goulash.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little secret when you're serving people something you've cooked. When people say, this is interesting, they don't like it. That's the way it is.
I get that an awful lot.
Yeah. Well, Dave, you are an absolute joy and a very, very interesting guest to have on talking about food.
I'm honored. So do you mind if I ask you a question?
Oh, ask anything you want.
So this has been, I'm really intrigued because you've been the private chef to the stars. I really am intrigued by that. And a lot of these stars, did they have private jets?
Some of them did, yeah.
Did you have to, how did you handle that when it came to?
It depended on which celebrity that I was working for. As some of the listeners know, I worked 2 years with Tom Cruise and then 13 with Mel Gibson. One of the celebrities, I supplied the food to the jet, and another celebrity, it was catered by the company where they kept the jet. But
gotcha.
I only cooked once actually on the jet. I remember that it was the flight attendant's job to put the meal together. And she came up to me and she tapped me on the shoulder to come back in the galley. And I went back. She was a sweet, sweet lady. And she said, I'm putting this together, but it doesn't look really nice. What should I do? And it was grilled asparagus, and it was a course. It was like the first course. So I quickly looked around, and she had some green onions. So we put them in some hot water and we wrapped them. And she had some raspberry vinaigrette. So we put the raspberry vinaigrette on the plate and then placed the wrapped bundle of asparagus on top. And the client was blown away by it. It ended up being in my private chef cookbook as one of the dishes. Yeah, but most of the time, well, I would say 99.9% of the time, I wasn't cooking on the jets.
Gotcha. One more question.
Yeah,
for you.
have to ask as
Thank
many
you for
as you
letting
want.
me interrupt.
Yeah, are you kidding?
No. So this one came to me while we were talking, and that was that you had mentioned something about that the trends are sometimes not as fast to come here.
Right.
So what trends do you see in other places you think might be big here?
There's one that I've noticed has arrived already, and that is microgreens. They're showing up on everything. And that was real popular about 15 years ago in Los Angeles. It was a big deal. They used them overwhelmingly as garnish on plates. You know.
Interesting.
And also sushi. Sushi has started to get very well started. It's been here for a little while, but it kind of, in my opinion, ran its course in a lot of the bigger cities, but it's very popular here now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I know the food trucks have just
that's
off.
another one. I'm glad you brought that up. Food trucks before I left Los Angeles were the biggest thing going on. They would pop up all over the place. I mean, hundreds of them, and it became the sort of chic thing to do, to know where all the the more popular ones are at any given time of the day. And I like the food truck world because it gives chefs the opportunity to sort of, no disrespect to them, throw stuff at the wall and see what's going to work. As opposed to, say, like we were talking about Adam Kirby playing with the classics. I like both, because there's still new sort of classics to be discovered, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a gazillion amount of ingredients that can be put together. And finding new things, yeah, that's really cool. And I really hope, I think it's sort of maybe a legality that holds food trucks back here,
Right.
where they can park at what times of the day. And I hope, for the businesses and also for the diners, that they sort of loosen up on that a little bit. That would be
I hear
cool.
You. Yeah. One last question.
Anything you want.
You're the man. This one is about the entrepreneurial spirit I have, and that is, what restaurant, if you were to open one, what would it look like, and how would it be different here in the Grand Strand? I know you had one for 9 years.
Yeah.
I could have gone there and asked you, what would you do different, knowing what you know now?
Mm-hmm. You
like that question?
I like them both. I just have this adoration for pizza. I could eat 3 meals a day. And you and I were having this conversation off the air about the things that we literally cannot swallow. And one of them for me is liver, although I absolutely adore foie gras, which is goose or duck liver. That being said, it's still my love of pizza is so much that if I did open a restaurant here, it would be another authentic Neapolitan wood-fired pizzeria. And what I would do differently, I would not obsess over the decor in the restaurant. It would be as simplified as could possibly be. There would be very little signage. I would put up a little neon sign that says pizza. Yeah, pizza. That's what I would do.
Love it.
Yeah.
Is that from your roots in New Jersey? Do you remember places like that?
Well, I never actually had authentic Neapolitan until, believe it or not, I visited, which I think is the godfather of that movement, Chris Bianco in Phoenix, who owns Bianco's Pizzeria, and it is just absolutely spectacular. Wood fired and just as authentic as it could possibly be. So that was way later on in my life, but certainly growing up in New Jersey, where there's a pizza shop on every corner. Yeah.
You're such a wealth of information. I hope this podcast goes out to everyone, because you're such a thoughtful person. And I really have enjoyed this so much.
Well, thanks for being here, and I appreciate that. I've realized over the years, turned 65 last year, that my real passion now is talking about it. I've had a wonderful career. I'm so grateful that I was given that career, and I'm so grateful that I ended up, my wife and I, in this beautiful slice of heaven that they call the Grand Strand. Dave Clayton, from sales representative to entrepreneur, video marketing, Facebook, Pawleys Island, Peeps Media Group. He's a philanthropist, just a litany of stuff, and manages to end up with as big a love of food as I have. Dave Clayton, make sure you follow him, folks. Pawleys Island Peeps, Merle's Inlet Peeps.
Front Street Peeps. North Myrtle Beach Peeps.
Keep going.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
If it ends in Peeps,
it's Dave's.
We're all about it.
I love it. Dave, thank you so much for coming in, and I hope you will come back.
It's a true honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming up after the break, folks, in studio is Chef Curtis Hillard. He is formerly the executive chef at Tide to Table restaurant in Litchfield, in the Litchfield Inn. I discovered him on Facebook. Folks, I can't give you a definition of what a perfectly plated dish looks like, but when I saw his photos of his dishes, they're perfectly plated. Gorgeous. I can't wait to talk to him. He's coming up right after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking About Food, folks. So glad you're here. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but my oldest brother, is a world-renowned, award-winning fine artist. And he paints in the style of the great masters. He was once called the last great American illustrator. So I grew up learning a bit about the art world. I'll tell you this, I'm not interested, nor do I have patience for modern art. Just me, just who I am. I often hear the food world speaking about cooking as an art, chefs being artists, and I'm not yet convinced of that. I'm sure that'll stir some chefs up a bit, but just my humble opinion. I've mentioned before, a dish needs to have an equal balance of flavor and presentation. If there is even a bit more of one than the other, well, I'm often not impressed. And it's very, very difficult to walk that thin line. And it is a thin line. I know it's difficult for me. I'll admit it. And I believe a chef that knows how to walk that thin line sits before me. I have looked at length to photos of his dishes, and they just blow me away. This chef knows how to walk that thin line. His name is Chef Curtis Hillard, former executive chef at Tide to Table. Chef Curtis, welcome to Talking About Food.
Thank you so much for having me.
No,
this is great.
I read your bio. It's just an absolute honor. You just blow me away. So you're from Ohio originally. Tell us how you got to the Grand Strand.
Okay, go Bucks, national champions. I have had an opportunity to travel many different areas, but with this job and this career. Coming down south after living in Maine for 12 years, getting closer to my daughter who's in Macon, Georgia.
Right.
So I wanted to be in the South. So I was in Greenville, South Carolina before this. I worked for Table 301 Company. Mm-hmm. And what I thought I wanted was to get into operations, because I've been doing this for 42 years now. Hotels, freestanding restaurants, country clubs, resorts, a mosaic of different culinary experiences.
Yeah.
Helping people acquire restaurants, open restaurants, do business plans for them.
Did you study?
Yes. I think the introduction to this business came from chefs that were people that were big on food history and what the business was of being a chef was all about. Because a lot of chefs can cook you a great meal, but they can't tell you how much it costs.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to work for chefs that were very well versed in not only the creative and making the plates look beautiful, but what it all meant business-wise.
I was just going to say the business side of it.
So the business end of it intrigued me more. So I educated myself as to, I taught myself how to do Excel and and be well versed in Word and things that would aid me in my ability to deliver information to people that needed it, whether it's menu cost analysis or inventory spreadsheets and stuff like that, which through my chefs, they were telling me the importance of. But yes, studying.
Did you go to culinary school?
I did my apprenticeship at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. And I stayed on afterwards. Well, first and foremost, I was doing baking and pastry, which is where I started.
Did you do the pastry at Tied to Table?
Yeah, I came up with those desserts during tastings to develop the menus.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The one that was the most proud of, I guess that's more poignant, is the indigo blue whiskey cake.
Yeah. Yeah, that jumped out at me.
Well, just doing my research, now I know of low country cuisine, and at the time we were having conversations about elevating low country cuisine and having me be seafood inspired, and for the restaurant. But being a pastry chef, former pastry chef, to look at the entire experience that the guests could have and how we could pay homage to the area that we're in. I just did my research on just the Charleston area and just learning more about not just the cotton fields that were the thing that were very prominent at the time, but indigo was the second most valuable cash crop.
Right.
And we were shipping it all over the world to dye fabrics and whatever else. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's see how we can incorporate that into something. And so that's where the indigo blue, using butterfly blue pea tea.
What is that?
It's actually a flower that.
Is that the garnish on the plate?
No, those are edible flowers.
Right, but they resemble. I mean, the color wise.
Well, that's funny you say that, because the edible flowers, especially the big orchid ones, which are the least expensive ones, and I don't really like them. I'd much rather cut the petals off and cut them down because they're too big.
Yeah.
People just take them, just set them off to the side. And it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
But I would rather just cut the petals down into smaller petal sizes and use those. But the color that's on those comes from indigo blue dye, which is a natural way to do it. So you're not incorporating some kind of chemical in order to have something that could be used on someone's plate.
Right, right. And I love the fact that you immediately want to incorporate the offerings of the South and, your words, elevating them.
Well, it's really about paying respect to the area that you're in. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay respect to the food that you're working with, and obviously trying to find the freshest, highest quality food in order to put in front of your customers. I was fortunate enough to be with a company with the Britain Hotels and Resorts, which manages the Litchfield Inn and Tied to Table, the resources of being able to do that research and try things out over and over and over to get them right. Not every place has that luxury.
Right.
But yes, I think it's very important to show that you're paying attention and that you care about what you're doing. I mean, we are passionate artists, and I'm going to say artists, not to be provocative.
No, and it doesn't. Seriously, it doesn't matter to me that much. It's my personal opinion as of now. I mean, that could change. As a matter of fact, I believe if that is true, or even if it's not true, if it is art or it isn't art, I think the closest you can get to art is the pastry world.
That is true. That is true. And I think the more you experience what can be done with food, the more you may change your mind as to that totality of a statement.
That position.
Yeah, that position. Right. So if you ever were to look up, a lot of people don't realize how much that chefs can be involved in culinary competitions. They hear about these competitions and whatnot, but I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Bocuse in Lyon, France, where one of my chefs was representing the United States. And the artistic presentation of what they're asked to do, and you'll see that a lot of desserts and pastries are very easily manipulated in a way that, that sugar work and butter and all that good stuff can be made into artistic plate. But if you look at some of the skill that it takes to take some of the other savory ingredients and even surpass the way it is presented on a plate more than a dessert, you'll find yourself saying, not only is it just an art form, I think better to say is that we present food on a plate that is artistically done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether you're an artist or not, I mean, you're a chef. You're someone that's passionate about food. You want to make sure that you please the guest. I mean, there's so much more to it. You could really look at some artists that are painters or writers, and they paint for themselves sometimes. You hear more about people that they painted for themselves. It wasn't for people to enjoy. They just were just expressing themselves. I think that's more where an artist is expressing themselves.
Yeah, and what you just said is exactly why I do this show, because I can do what I want. I've been offered, to do shows in other places where they want me to, review and critique restaurant. I'm not interested in that. I just love talking about food and the business. I just feel that the term artist gets thrown around too easily. And when I realized that, I then started questioning myself, because I look, I can be completely wrong, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just cool discussion, I think. Anyway, I started then questioning myself, because a lot of people like to be able to call themselves artists in a plethora of areas. That plumber, no disrespect to plumbers, they're fantastic people. We all need them. That plumber over there, boy, he's an artist. Well, not really. So anyway, that's why I started questioning myself in my business, and that's why I brought it up to you, because like I said, I think if cooking is an art, certainly the closest to it is pastry, and your creations are just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Could you have accomplished what you have accomplished without going to culinary school, looking back?
Well, looking back, it's kind of hard to pull all that experience away and, oh yeah, I could still do that. I'm not sure if that would be respectful or fair to the people that along the way helped me be able to get out of my own way in some cases,
Tell me about it.
Because I feel that the people that are coming up in this business need to understand, if you're coming out of culinary school, that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
You scratch the surface on the basics of how to do any particular element of what we do, whether it's broiling or sauteing or braising, or learning at basic desserts like creme brulee and stuff like that. There's so much more. But what I tell my staff, and it's just the way it is, 90% of my job has nothing to do with actually putting the food on the plate.
Yeah.
It's everything else. And you learn that along the way. It's important to be able to inspire others. Even if you're a line cook standing next to another line cook, if your chef has set the stage correctly, it's a competitive but respectful kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of repetition.
I've often compared it to a Broadway show.
Yes.
Before the show goes on, you're going over the little idiosyncrasies that you have to do as a performer. You need to step here. You need to say this line here. So you're sort of practicing that. And then all of a sudden, the curtain opens. Same thing as opening the door in the restaurant and hoping that all of your cast of characters are going to be able to do what you just said. Think that chessboard of 3 to 4 or 5 steps ahead, and yet work like a well-oiled machine. Who are some of your, you know what, before I ask you that, do you watch cooking shows?
I knew this was going to come up because I just had
Before you answer, so I can make sure that you answer honestly, not that I think you would lie about it, but
lie.
I have said before, I would rather be waterboarded than watch cooking shows. There's one or two that I turn on once in a while. But do you like them? And also, if you don't mind, if you can expound. First answer, do you or do you not? And then let me know what effects do you think and I said Food Network, but I mean food shows in general have had on the public. Do you watch?
Not as much as you would think.
Why?
It's the time that I have.
So if you had time, you would watch more cooking shows.
There are shows that are very prevalent right now that are, changing the way people think about, what we do, like The Bear.
Yeah.
People ask me, do you watch The Bear? I've seen a couple episodes, but I just can't.
It's funny because that's the one show that I will watch because it takes on so many different, it goes down so many different avenues, personal relationships, that it's almost like the food part of it is secondary. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I cannot get myself to continue watching it because it's two things. I live that every day.
Yeah.
And do you want it to be constantly reminded of what
And
you
now
just
I
went
get it.
through, you know?
Yeah.
And some of the stuff is just, it's for TV. It's a little too over the top and unrealistic. But in someone's world, I'm sure some part of that experience that they're trying to illustrate has happened to someone, but has everything in the world happened to this guy?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I'll tell you something I learned, and I think that it may be one of the reasons why the show is so popular. I've had a number of listeners say to me, can you talk more about the inner workings of a restaurant or as in the private chef world? And my gut prior to people telling me that was people aren't interested, but they really are. They're interested in what goes on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it, like you said before, you don't necessarily want to watch a lot of these types of shows because you work it all day. So the immediate thought is people don't want to hear me talk about what goes on in a restaurant, but they actually do.
Well, I have a personal connection with Anthony Bourdain. And when he came out with Kitchen Confidential, that was behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it was not well received by many. Some people respected what he had to say because it was his truth. It was his experience. But to pull the veil off and show
exactly what I was just going to say.
Really?
He pulled the curtain aside. Yeah. Go
and
ahead.
said, this is what it's about. Now, that was kind of the, obviously it was the beginning of people's curiosity. And it's been a while since obviously that came out. But since then, with the Food Network and other shows that have kind of given you a peek behind the scenes, maybe we need a little bit more discussion about what the experience is. And I would probably take the approach of an educator to those that are coming up in the business, more of a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
If you want to be a chef, well, this is what you'd experience.
Well, since we're on that topic, this was a question I was going to ask you later on. Give the listeners one horror story. I'm sure you got 1,000 of them, and the difficulty may be trying to remember exactly which one you want to talk about, or that you can talk about.
Well, yeah, I'm going by a couple because I can't. Well, as a chef, when things are going really well, when you're a chef and you're introduced to something in the middle of service that throws you way off track from what you thought the night was going to be, because not every night is perfect. There was a time where I was making or helping my chef make this lobster bisque. And he was going to serve it with this, what's called a croustade. It's like a little bread crust,
Right.
That will sit in the bowl. And he had foie, seared foie on top of that, and then a lobster claw. And then he would pour the bisque around it.
Yeah.
So I was responsible for pulling it from the tilt skillet, just a big cooking vessel that tilts forward when you crank the knob and to pour it into buckets or whatever you're going to do. And I had, you know where this is going, right? And this was something
how we can laugh about it now.
Exactly. But this was, like lobster tails and all these different expensive ingredients put into this broth and been cooking for like all day. And he's nursing it and everything and skimming it and everything and teaching us how this is supposed to be done. And we go to serve, and I'm bringing the bisque from the warmer, which I've already put into these vessels, and I'm bringing it over to the table. And there's an area specified so that they can continue to plate. Well, I wear a size 14 shoe. And I just got tripped over myself. And not only did I spill the soup, all of the plates on the table that already had the croustade and the foie
and the
lobster
claw
was waiting for the soup.
Right.
It ended up on the table, and the force of the soup in the vessel pushed a couple of plates, and it just spilled all over the place.
Oh.
Now, you learn a lot about the person that's leading the kitchen after you do that.
Yeah.
He was the calmest person in that moment. I expected him to just erupt.
Yeah.
But for this particular chef was someone that you never really heard yell or scream or raise his voice, opposite of some other chefs I work for. He was the calmest, and he said, okay, stop. And he immediately started giving direction as to what to do to rectify the situation. Because anybody can live in the moment of the problem and freak out, and then everybody else freaks out, and then that helps no one. What I learned, obviously, was don't do that. Be careful. But when you're faced with a major problem like that, how you handle it at that point shows your character and that you believe that it can be, that ship can be corrected, and you're not stuck in having that be a problem all the time.
I've often said that chefs that, typically lose their temper in the kitchen are either insecure or ill-prepared.
Yes.
And this gentleman sounded like he had it together, a world of experience. Who are some of your influences throughout your career?
Scott Bennett was a big influence. He was working under a master chef. He was like the protege to this guy, and he was my chef at a country club in Columbus, Ohio. He was meticulous about food that needed to be as natural as possible. Instead of adding a roux to something, flour and butter mixture to thicken a sauce or a soup or whatever, he said, just let it reduce naturally.
Reduce it,
His approach was pure. So much respect to the food, the animal, the purest way of being able to deliver something without having 5 sauces and being, 5 feet tall. And it wasn't about that. It was about true flavor that you can extract from the ingredients and let the food speak for itself. And anything else you're enhancing it with was only to complement it.
I can't believe you're saying this stuff. I love it.
I was very fortunate to be able to work under people like this. I mean, there's people who have come along the way, like Anthony, giving me advice as to how can I approach some things that I was doing at the time. But he was basically saying you need to focus more on what you feel is more important to you. To do all these crazy things, these are great to build your resume. But if you can focus on something that you feel very passionate about, and he's been through it.
Yeah.
He even, with some of his shows, like No Reservations and whatnot, would talk about his experience when he went to like the French Laundry. And he's like, I never knew where food came from. It just came in a box.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we would just fix it. And here is Thomas Keller showing him how he's got his own garden and he's got his own farmers and the importance of where food comes from and how you can get the best out of the best. Or if you don't have much to work with, how can you create something from very little? Great having all these different ingredients at your disposal, and anybody can, that's great. But if you can walk into someone's kitchen, like what you do, and you can say, okay, they don't see the potential of what's there, being someone that could be creative with very little to work with.
But when Bourdain said to you, focus on what your passion is. Don't necessarily, not your words, but don't necessarily follow the trend that's going on, but focus. Sure. What did you discover that was at that time?
Well, I had some soul searching to do, because when you are in it at the time, you have so many voices that are telling you what they think is important. And, and he was just one other person that was able to help me push myself to have the right perspective as to what I needed. Mm-hmm. So it took some time, but what I really love to do is teach others what I do.
Yeah.
When I focused on working with individuals, I would press them to learn how to work with very little, because a lot of times you'll go into kitchens and there's not a lot to work with. If you're working in a new restaurant, you're just opening up, the owner doesn't have a lot of money to throw around. So you have to be able to say, it's okay. We'll work this several different ways with what you have. And if you're skilled enough, if you put yourself through that enough, if you're then put into an environment where you have everything at your disposal, obviously it's that much easier because you've pushed yourself to work with very little.
This sort of piggyback on what you were just saying about being put into a situation where you have to use what's available to you. I'll never forget when I moved. I was 25 years in the private chef business and then opened up my own wood-fired pizzeria. And there were chefs that would come in and say, "Hey, now you're in the real world. Now you really see it must be much more difficult." And I'd say, "No, I cook off the same menu every day."
Right,
you know,
right.
I don't walk into Mel Gibson's house, open up the refrigerator on a Monday, and say, not much here. Do I have to run to the market, or can I make do with what's here?" What would your dream job be right now?
To do the work that I would like to do and not have to answer to anyone.
Then you need to do a podcast.
Actually, I was thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
And you're really the voice right now, food in this area. So podcast is there, doing private chef events, date nights. I did put something on Pawleys Island Peeps and got great responses.
If somebody offered you backing, would you be interested in another restaurant?
Yes. And I really wanted to do that after being with this particular company I was with. I wanted to, I had like a 3 to 5 year plan, which allowed me to become part of the community. And I really want to be involved in, community events and get to know who's who. And when I teach my staff, everything I go back to that I show this as an importance to them should be whatever you're doing right now, how does that affect the guest experience?
Yeah.
So I want to continue that. And if someone were to offer me the opportunity to do that in my own place, I would love that.
You touched on something just a little ways back, that it's all about the guest experience. You tell me if you've witnessed this. I sometimes have experienced chefs that don't necessarily believe that it's all about them and their creations, and so be it if the guests aren't happy. And I think I've seen it too often, to be absolutely honest. And I've said this a million times. The listeners are probably sick of hearing it, but I got into this business because I discovered I can make people happy. Mm-hmm. The drug-like effect that it has on me has never left me.
I love what I do. I love what I do.
Do you have favorite restaurants in the Grand Strand?
I'm actually trying to learn them now.
Oh, that's right. You said you've only been here since October. I've been here 3.5 years now, and I still feel new.
I've been to Steve Perrone's place. Actually, was in his chef's table kitchen in the back. Frank's.
Out back. Frank's. Yeah.
A couple of places up in Myrtle Beach.
Have you been to
nothing very notable.
217?
No, but I've heard that is someplace I need to check out.
What about pizza?
Pizza? Myself particularly, I'm not a huge pizza guy. No. Chicken wings all day long.
Do you have favorite chicken wings here yet that you've discovered?
Actually, yeah, this hat that I'm wearing, the taco place that's
Michoacan.
Yeah,
I just heard about that. Where is that?
That is actually right at the top of the street where Litchfield is at, right on 17.
Right. As a matter of fact, I think I've been there, but
Domino's.
I didn't. I think I've been there,
They
but
do
I
an
have
amazing job. And
on
their
wings.
chicken wings there.
Yeah.
They have this. It's a spicy cilantro coated chicken wing, and they make this queso sauce, and I have to chef it. So
you have to what?
I have to chef it. Well, I have to
of
create
course.
something with what they have there, and I'm taking the queso dip instead of looking like blue cheese. I'm dipping it in queso dip, which is not good for my figure.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap this up with this last question.
Sure.
I ask all chefs that come into the studio, what is the one food item that you love that you'd be embarrassed to tell other chefs about?
You would be amazed that a lot of chefs don't eat like they produce at their job. It's just not.
I'll tell you one more.
What's up?
I had at Flame Pizzeria where I owned and cooked every single pizza there, and absolutely pained over that dough 00 from Naples, the whole thing. I wasn't crazy about my style of pizza, Neapolitan. And very often on the way home at about 11 o'clock at night, I would stop at a Kroger's and buy a frozen pizza because I just enjoyed it. So tell me, what name one?
Ramen.
Is there a brand?
No. I was challenged with this Top Chef challenge to work with ramen in different ways and do it gourmet. So I kind of fell in love with the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
No shame.
Believe it or not, there is one. It is called Black Shin. Shin. It's in a slightly bigger package, a red package. And the sauce that it creates is remarkable. I've considered buying packages of that and just taking the sauce packets out to make the sauce for it. Chef Curtis Hillard, formerly of Tied to Table and a gazillion other places. You are an absolute fascinating guest to have on, and I can tell that there is this connection already. I believe you and I are on the same path. Thanks so much for coming in, and I hope you'll come back.
Actually, I look forward to coming back. I think you hit it. I would love to be able to collaborate with you. Let's make what is going on in the Grand Strand area as far as culinary food, the topic of food, something we could talk about endlessly.
And that was Chef Curtis Hillard, former executive chef at Tied to Table. And don't forget, if you folks want to hire him for a small party, private chef for the evening, or maybe just a fun get-together, ladies' night, whatever, you can find more about him on chefbearcooking.com. That's Chef, B-E-A-R, cooking.com. Don't forget the wonderful conversation we had with Dave Clayton of Pawleys Island Peeps. Follow him on his pages, Pawleys Island Peeps, Murrells Inlet Peeps. Anything that ends in Peeps is going to belong to Dave Clayton, and he knows the area, he knows the restaurants. Don't forget, we discussed with him Bistro 217 in Pawleys Island. That's fabulous. He mentioned Alfresco Italian Bistro in Georgetown. He thinks is terrific. Also in Georgetown, Root Restaurant for their steaks. He said it's the best steaks he's ever had. We talked about La Trattoria Italian restaurant in Murrells Inlet. I can vouch for that one. And also he mentioned for pizza, Landolfi's in Pawleys Island. Folks, that's just going to about wrap it up for episode 16 of Talking About Food. Hope you all enjoyed it. And always remember, you are your family's private chef. Thanks for listening.